Okay, we're just going live, folks. O morena tātou, mākuni ki mawhata tātou hui. He konori, he korori ki te atua, he maunga rongo ki te whenua, he whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Āmini. Ki te atua, anei mātou I tuka whakamoima te kia hui. Manakitia mai ki a mātou I roto I tā mātou nei mahi I tēnei rā. Manakitia hoki e tahi o ngā whānau e noho maruri ana, e noho pauri ana. Tēnei tā mātou ino ki a koe ki roto te ino o tōtama a ino karaiti. Āmeni.
Āmeni.
O kura tātou, nau mai karamai ki tēnei hui a tātou. Welcome to everybody and also welcome to members of the public who are joining us today. Thank you for once again participating in our board meeting. We've got a slight change of order of events this morning. Dr. Osman Mansour is going to talk to us first about the COVID-19 vaccination update. But before we get into that, Josh, I do want to formally welcome you in your new position as Deputy Chair of Hauora Tairāwhiti. Congratulations. So following Gavin's signal last year that he was unable to commit the time due to work commitments, the Minister has just very recently appointed Josh as Deputy Chair. So no mai e hoa, good to have you here as Deputy Chair.
Thank you for your confidence, Kim. Kia ora.
Hey te pai. So in the first instance, we'll hand over to you, Dr. Mansour, and if you can give us our update on the COVID vaccination update program. Probably one of the things that we'll be quite keen to hear about is not just progress that we're making, but progress against plan. Yes, pass to you.
So, kia ora koutou. As you know, we started on the 27th of I've got to think of the month of March. Sorry, no, 27th of February. No, 27th of February we started quite early, and that was doing the tier 1. But then we didn't start with the tier 2 until last 12th of April. So we had a bit of a gap. In terms of the tier 1, one of the issues we're still trying to address is actually not for the port workers generally, but for the stevedores. We've got quite a low vaccine uptake, which is a bit of a concern. And on that topic, I've actually written to the Director General saying one of the reasons that might encourage people to have the vaccine if they knew they wouldn't be swabbed, which is the discussion we've had. And the suggestion actually we'd be better off being protected if we've got vaccinated workers and tested workers anyway. That's with, we just wrote to the Chief Executive on that. So since then, tier 2 has really been the frontline health workers, and that's been progressing smoothly. And then the next part of tier 2 is going to be those at increased risk of that. I can see Nicola wants to say something, but no. So that's all progressing quite smoothly. What I've been doing as well is going around, particularly to health workers and the ARC homes, in speaking to them. Came across one frankly anti-vax person in one of those groups who really is not obviously going to listen. Generally, people have been quite receptive and keen to hear about the vaccine. I think it's actually remarkable that we've got. I think it must be 1 billion doses now. I keep used globally, and really this one safety concern, which is this rare, unusual clotting risk, which luckily has not been found with the Pfizer vaccine so far. So that's good. The other issue is we've been getting some requests from GPs about people who are keen to get the vaccine. So while we've got the vaccine hesitant, we've also got those who are keen to have the vaccine as well. So that's another aspect of it. But otherwise, I think it's progressing smoothly. One of our main challenges is actually the CIR, the COVID immunisation register, is still not fully functional. Not fully functional, that we actually don't have that precise coverage data on the port workers or the health workers that we should have right now. But I understand that is happening. So I think that's in short. I think the big challenge for us really is going to go from these really small groups of health workers who we expect really to be uptaking to a larger population where we have seen some resistance, as I said, particularly in some group of the port workers. It is I guess, a matter of personal choice, obviously, but obviously it works only as well as we can get the whole community protected. So that's always going to be a challenge for us, how we can move forward in that space, given that there seems to be substantial concerns. And I think there's always a ground, it's always a grain of truth to any of these concerns, but they get blown out to becoming creating a concern that's not really justified.
So just while I was just answering that call, so what we've got now, of course, is our planning for the rest of the time up at the end of October, week by week, in terms of the amount of doses that we need to do over that period of time. I think I said before, we max out at 3,600 doses per week for most of the campaign program. We're up to about 30 people trained as vaccinators now. We're heading towards 50, which we think will make it comfortable to be able to have the numbers of teams that we have to have, both here within the city and then out northwards and towards the west as well, being able to have that coverage over the population to get that out. One of the things that Oz was just raising there around hesitancy of people getting, Oz has been very instrumental in getting some good frequently asking questions out there so that we can provide that for people. We are seeing that when you can get good information to people and that has an effect. And of course, a really major positive was week before last when iwi launched the program. That got a lot of coverage there on that day, and a room full of people there that are able to get out within communities and the network that iwi have got within communities to be able to provide the information that people need to be able to make that informed choice about the vaccination. So.
Just on that, I did particularly want to thank you for your speaking slot at the breakfast. So we attended a breakfast hosted by Tairāwhiti, launching the iwi component of the vaccination program, and particularly the comms program that they're heading up. And Dr. Oz gave a really, really good presentation, brilliant presentation on the technical dimensions of the vaccination program, and just really good, solid, easy to understand information about not just the vaccination, but the program and the risks in dispelling some of the myths. And so thank you very much for that. And I did say to Oz and to the room that the more we can get him in front of our community, providing that really, high quality, accurate, unambiguous, but not dumbed down information, it was really good. Now, does anyone have any questions they want to ask Tony?
Thanks, Dr. Oz, for your presentation. So you said that there was a low vaccine uptake with stevedores. Are you able to clarify that as a percentage?
Well, not precisely. That's because we don't have the CIR is not working at that level to be able to give us that.
Okay.
But the sort of figures we have been given from the initial week, bearing in mind we're still getting more consents dribbling through, was only 4 out of 40.
4 out of 40.
So again, that's not validated. So that's just a report, yeah. CIR
records who has been vaccinated, but it doesn't tell us in a group who should have been vaccinated.
Exactly. We haven't been able to get coverage statistics out of it.
And then since that time, there's more people have come through our vaccination, so we're not exactly sure how many
anymore
now. Yeah, so
that was the first week.
The initial figures, which are some weeks ago now.
So stevedores, my understanding, stevedores crew in Tauranga, they travel to Gisborne, they crew in Napier, and they move around a lot. I would see that as probably the most riskiest entry point for the virus into Tairāwhiti, if at all. How are we going to really nail this down? If coverage data on into stevedores is an Achilles heel, and it is an Achilles heel from my view.
Yeah. Well, one remediation strategy is we've actually offered the vaccine to those around them, because technically they're not part of that group around them. So at least if they're spread, because they have a lot of obviously contact with their workers, it's in other words to try and protect that. Again,
just to check, I'm not sure that the stevedores are the group that are moving. There are a group that do move, and they tend to be the people.
Pilots.
Yeah, the partner organisations.
What?
Stevedores do not tend to be the group that move.
Well, in my experience, I've sat on planes with whole crews of stevedores who are moving around the country from port to port doing stuff, and they've sat and chatted to me and told me how that works, and they'll spend a month in Bristol and then they move to there. And
We need to check the local teams, because what we understand is that the majority of that group would be locally
Based. The other thing, of course, is the main line of defence is the regular testing. That is the main issue around defence office. That is tried and true that we've had in place all along.
What's your assessment of the level of risk to stevedores, given how long a ship is at sea?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. We have a very low risk port because practically all our ships either have been more than 14 days at sea from wherever they came from, or they've come from a place like Australia, which doesn't actually have local spread, barring Perth at the moment. But in fact, in the bulk of our ships come directly from China, which again hasn't had spread. Of course, they also come from Korea and Japan, which is spread now. But by and large, those places, they're really on 2-week journeys. So if there is any spread, again, it is possible they wouldn't do it, but the risks are lower here than in other parts. And again, I haven't seen any data, but I understand the situation for stevedores is not a local issue, it's a national one. But again, I haven't seen any actual data. Just again, reports that that's the group across the nation which have got no coverage.
Have they expressed to you what their concerns are?
I think there's basically the two concerns I hear is around the fact that they don't need it because, they don't believe that the COVID is serious, which again, for younger people, you can say that may be true for them on a personal level. And then the other one is about, well, we don't know what the vaccine is going to be doing in 10 years. And that's, again, unanswerable, what the long-term impacts are.
My concern was, as we move out into the wider community, will the approach we've used be sufficient? And with your expertise, your one, what are your thoughts?
I think, look, it's really important that this is not something that just kind of dropped down from above to the population, but something that the population is asking for. We know that there's different levels, there's a spectrum of people, from people who are really keen to get the vaccine to people who absolutely won't get it. So I think the question is how we can help to shift that curve, shift the curve along a bit to kind of get people more understand. And I think that's going to be an ongoing, and it really is, the importance of GPs and health professionals as trusted advisors is really important. The importance of what the community chatters, the influencers, as Kim was saying, I think all of these issues are really important. It's not just about top down, it's really coming to meet the community, because basically we can bring the vaccine, but we have to have the people, and again, with this vaccine, because of its whole chain, it's a very tight operation to linking a person to a vaccine. Yes, I think it's going to be really dependent on having good community-led champions, to actually advocate for this at every level, I think.
And is that part of our communication plan?
Yes, and absolutely with Kiwi as well, in terms of their community champions network, around having those people within communities being able to have the information available for people to be able to make that informed choice within their communities.
I think the other thing that's going to help as well is having the health professionals having it first, right? Because then they will be able to give their personal experience as well as the science as well to explain it. And so far, the experience we've heard is, I've asked for any adverse events to be reported to me as well as to CALM, and I've only heard of one. And this is a lady who had, and it's been reported overseas, they've had extended reactions as part of the local one. It seems quite a rare phenomenon, but I believe there might be 2 others in New Zealand. But she had her second dose fine so far. We'll see if she has a reaction.
Robin's got a question on Zoom. Do all people working in Tairāwhiti rest homes get access to the vaccine?
Absolutely, yeah, because they're the frontline health workers, and they've been I understand.
And all residents in rest homes.
Yeah. So I think we're doing the rest. Yeah. So the staff are being done already as part of the frontline health workers, and then the plan is to go to the rest homes to do the residents as high-risk people, obviously not very mobile.
There's a mention in our papers a bit later on about bringing pharmacists and GPs into the vaccination program. Is that something that's desirable?
Well, I think that's absolutely critical in terms of the information. I think also GPs and pharmacists can also encourage people to, ask and check as well. In terms of organisation, I think there's one key issue which
I think they've gone frozen over there, Robin.
They're frozen up.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Because no longer.
Yeah, so just in terms of what the role, how the GPs, because I think one of the challenges for GPs, of course, is they're already very busy at the moment. And, this is something how to manage that. But Nicola.
So we've been engaging with the PHO and they've sent out an AOI to general practice, and we've had approaches from some national pharmacy groups. Each of the approaches we've had, there are some specifics that people will need to assure us, because the DHB has the majority of focused vaccination. Those groups would need to work with us to look at how they would support the vaccination of the total population. So it's not an opportunistic activity that general practice can pick up, neither is it an opportunistic activity that a pharmacist can pick up. But we have had interest and we are pursuing how that might work with us.
So that's because of things like having to draw 6 doses out.
Yes, and use a whole
immediately
vial
and use it all. So it's the logistics
Yeah.
getting around
and the cold chain.
getting people vaccinated.
Yeah.
Getting the
So
vaccines
it's not,
to them.
dedicated.
And it's not the vaccine. You can't just leave it in the fridge like with the others. You only got 4 days at the moment after it's, because we lose a day in transit from Auckland.
However, we are getting a minus 20 degree refrigerator, which will be delivered soon, and that'll enable us to have 2 weeks of,
At minus 20, and then a full 5 days at the 2 to 8 after that.
I just,
Sorry, no, you continue.
just heard this morning that Europe was going to allow vaccinated Americans into Europe. What's our data recording systems if that was to happen with us?
Well, that's a CIR, the COVID immunisation register. So that's going to be the information for us. Now, the whole issue about vaccine passports and all of that is an ethical,
something we don't have.
and it's really basically a global and national issues. I think is going to make. Yeah, I think it's really global one in the end. But the vaccine passports, because WHO has got the mandate to do this. I mean, they do this already with yellow fever vaccine, but they've been very reluctant to do it because of access. The vaccine at the moment is very, very limited. So they don't want to create another. Yeah, but I think that's meanwhile, each country's doing their own, airlines are doing their own, and everybody's.
But
at least we'll have the core register.
Yeah, I guess we have to in respect to all of this. But I did want to also thank you in respect to our conversation. I really appreciated your very, I guess you've got a lot of knowledge in this space, so thank you. My question is just, we have with all our vaccination immunisations a set rate, like we talk of 100% obviously in respect. So is there like an absolute goal in the now with dealing with the hesitancy, et cetera, but have we got a portion, like are we saying if we can get 95%, we have these targets? So has that been part of the conversation, as if we can just get to this point of getting 72%? I don't know.
Right, and some of that conversation of targets actually been changed with the new variants. Because with it, part of the things like, if you have, this is part of this R, which is really an abstract concept, not something you actually can measure, the number of the theoretical number that will there. To get herd immunity from a vaccine point of view, you've got to get coverage 1 minus 1 over R. It's just a simple arithmetic relationship between how infectious the organism and how many people you have to have immune to stop it spreading. It's very simple. Like if on average I will spread it to 3 others, right? If 2 of those can be protected, that means only spread to 1. And if it's 1 or less, then the it'll die out. So the problem rate is that actually we don't know what R is.
Right.
You know, it's an abstract concept, and it'll vary by setting and stuff. And what's certainly the case now with the what I like to call SARS 2.1, which is the variant first identified in Kent, or the B117, that is at least 50%, if not 100% more transmissible, which would mean any calculation. And again, bear in mind, we don't actually know what the R is. We can measure it in different things, but we don't know what R is. That would mean that the coverage we would need to achieve that sort of herd immunity level of coverage is consequently going to be much higher than the 70 to 80%. Plus, we've also got kids, and I'm worried. We haven't actually seen the data yet to show this, but there are people who believe that that with the 2.1, the Kent variant, it's actually preferentially more infectious in children. So it's more infectious across the age, but it may be preferentially so more in children, which is going to make it even more. You know, so the whole concept of herd immunity, if children become major drivers, again, very different. And I think, you know, the whole concept of herd immunity is somewhat limited in terms of the vaccine, because we know that you can have 95% immunity to measles and still have large outbreaks as long as you have clusters of susceptibles together. So it's not that once you reach coverage, there's not going to be any more spread. It's just that spread will be limited by the amount of vaccine, and the higher that coverage is, the more it is. But it's really just random factors where the vaccine happens to go to. So
and have we got a point?
But back to the thing, neither WHO nor the government has set any coverage target to my knowledge. That's the main thing, that the coverage target. Like we know with measles, we need 95% two-dose coverage to reach that herd immunity. Nobody's set that figure yet because we don't actually know.
Okay. And my second question was just because you have such a profound knowledge of this space and there's such a lot of misinformation respect, have we got a point with region, you know, to say this is what we want you to consider when talking about this? I mean, yeah. So respect to that. I mean, obviously,
I've just put my name far and wide, saying please send me your questions and concerns on various bits of paper, including the questions and answers we did, which was originally from the port worker. And I'm not hearing anything substantial. I mean, there's occasionally I hear new ones, like at one of the nurses thing that told me that, because this RNA is the same as some RNA in the womb, and therefore it's going to cause absence of fertility. And I found out later, actually, the whole original story was wrong. There is no, it was bad, so there's kind of these stuff, which is basically you find out actually there's nothing here, or that there is something here, but it's just been totally misunderstood because the complexities of science, I guess.
Does anyone else have any questions?
But very, very happy, very keen to hear those. So please, yes, do please send it to me through. Yeah, whatever. To hear what's actually going on, especially if it's got some credibility. I think for a while there was, and I think you picked up as well. See this, I forget the lady's name now. The outdoors party was saying that it's illegal, right? Well, I'm not a lawyer. I can just tell you about the safety and efficacy, right? And on the basis of the safety and efficacy, I can say, look, there's no reason for not having this vaccine. Actually, a really interesting program I heard saying, why did we take so long to license the vaccine when we knew it was effective and it was killing people? By delaying, going through the thoughts there. And that's kind of like people make these decisions about, what's worth. But actually, it's a thought that if we had licensed these vaccines early on when we knew it was safe, but we didn't know it was effective yet, we'd have saved a lot of lives. I mean,
I do have a question. Thank you very much, Dr. Oz. I wanted to, you'd commented about the rare occurrence of blood clotting in regards to the use of the vaccine. Are you able to expand for our knowledge and also for those people that may be watching on the public and those who are here from the press about that kind of occurrence in regards to, say, across other vaccines, other injections, et cetera, is that kind of consistently the same for others?
Well, I think we, and particularly with measles vaccine, about 1 in 50,000 risk of this problem with your platelets. But it's somewhat different to this one. It's a very unusual one where you're both getting clotting, but you're also getting bleeding. It's which are kind of like two opposite things. Because you've got your clotting system supposed to stop your bleeding, and you're getting clotting with bleeding. And it is due to this particular antibody to a platelet, this FP4. Not that makes any real difference, but the point is it's a very specific type. It's not like just a general clotting. People often wonder if they already, if they're on the pill, you're already at increased risk of clotting, where there's risk. So far, there's no suggestion that this particular risk is related to other risks of clotting, like being on the pill. It does seem to be commoner in younger people and under 50, which is why people like Australia saying if you're under 50, you should have the Pfizer vaccine rather than the AstraZeneca. One of the troubles with this, it's so rare. The overall risk is something like 4 in a million, but according to some, if you're younger, it might be like 1 in 50,000, 1 in 70,000, but it's really the upper risks. But it's actually quite rare to actually find out whether it's caused or just happening by chance afterwards, because it's such a rare event.
And that's specifically for the AstraZeneca vaccine, and we're delivering the Pfizer vaccine in Aotearoa, is that correct?
And it's also been linked with the Johnson & Johnson, which is another what we call a viral vector. So I believe it may be due to the viral vector, but we cannot say it's not caused by the Pfizer vaccine. It's just that we haven't yet seen any signals. It is possible that it is something that's happening with the Pfizer vaccine, but at a lower level. But even at that level, 4 per million, of getting this thing, and then if you get the COVID, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of having clotting problems. So just the orders of risk is just not really
magnitude's difference.
It doesn't really change the risk benefit. Yes, it does, because before this we said there was nothing. And bear in mind, again, we're not talking about the Pfizer vaccine for the moment. We're just talking about the AstraZeneca. But at the moment, I think the WHO says it's not confirmed as a risk factor for these things. It certainly seems possible and likely, but it's not confirmed because of the low risk. I think there's going to be more investigation. I think we'll get more clarity on that.
But again, that's for the AstraZeneca.
And that's for the AstraZeneca. So far, there hasn't been any signal with the COVID, with the Pfizer, with either Pfizer or the RNA type vaccines. So it does seem.
For the record, we've got Pfizer.
And we have the Pfizer, the mRNA vaccine, not the viral vector. And I think one of the reasons, because the government did have options to buy them all, but I think they made the decision to go for the Pfizer. I'm not party to why they made it, because it had really good effectiveness results. It was really showing the best efficacy in the trials. And not only that, I think now we're seeing some glimpses that's actually being. We know it's efficaciously, it's very effective against the 2.1, the Kent variant. There's also some glimpses from Israel that may also be effective against the variant identified in South Africa, which is one where we're more worried about the escape. But the interesting thing there is that 1 dose was not protected, but 2 doses seem to be. And again, that's the need for 2 doses. Again, that's very early data. Not yet. I wouldn't say this is. It's not clear that it is, but it's suggestive that it is actually good. And that's what the laboratory data would suggest. But the efficacy we get from these from the RNA vaccines is so good, even though it is dropped off, because the variants have. The reason they will change is if they can escape that immunity, then they're going to spread more. So there's a drive for them to do that, but it's obviously not doing sufficiently to escape totally against the Pfizer RNA vaccine, which is great news. So far, again, limited data, we haven't seen it all, and that's yet to be played out.
All the data we have is pointing towards a 100% vaccination program.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's and that's always say, look, we've managed to keep the virus out with all of the other strategies. The other strategies still have to be highly relevant, because the world's the world's not fully vaccinated, and even when it's fully vaccinated, we know it stops us getting flu. There's been hardly any flu in the northern winter, despite all the COVID, because of our respiratory precautions. So we don't know. Hopefully, we'll keep it out, but we don't know when it's going to come. And I think that's exactly right. When it comes, that's what's going to keep us from worrying about a large outbreak. But it's going to take some while till we get there. We ought to keep it out and remember how lucky we are when you look at what's going on, especially places like India or Brazil right now.
You're right, and I think sometimes in our, very privileged position we're in, we forget that.
It's very easy to forget how lucky we are.
Very easy to forget. Thank you very much, Dr. Oz. We will want to be keeping to catch up with you and with Sandy over the course of this. It's clearly one of the most important things we're doing.
And keep sending me those tricky questions.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Thanks, George.
Now, just before we move to Donna and Taylor with the update on Kia ora Hauora Tairāwhiti, I probably do just need to record apologies from Ngā, who's at a tangi, and from Gavin, who's got work commitments today. And on that note, we'll welcome Donna Kupinga and Kayla Hainga to give us an update on the Hauora program. Hara mai. Grab a seat, pull up a chair.
Few seats.
Oh, there's one.
Oh, there you go.
Nā korua, nau mai hara pai. Kei a korua te wā.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Pera ki te nui ngō mātai rosi i te rūma nei, ko hiku rangi te maunga, ko waiaku te awa. Engari ko taku tino, te wāhi kai ngākau kia hau ko hiru hārama, ko Donna Kupinga hau. Kia ora te whānau, hiku rangi te maunga, ko waiaku te awa, ko Ngāti Whare Tiwi, ko te ahi a tātua te maunga, ko Maka te awa, ko te awe māpara, ko te aitanga amati, uapu. Kia ora. Right, okay, so we were all prepared. I thought that we weren't going to be, so we know you've all told for us to come since November last year, but we thought we needed to meet with Tiwan first before we came here. So we were waiting for that hui to take place before coming before you. Nevertheless, kei te pai, we'll kōrero about Kia ora Hauora. So both Taylor and myself, we carry 0.5 of that position. It's funded by Lakes DHB, and but we're physically based down here. So the original contract was always through Lakes to look after our 5 Te Manawataki, or the Midlands, used to be called. And at some stage, I think in the last 3 years, Hauora Tairāwhiti tonoed for the position to be based here, for a physical position to be based down here. So we joined in October of last year, and my position is just slight bit different to Taylor's because I carry 2 other hats, which are Hauora Māori Training Fund and Māori Health Workforce Coordinator. So I was trying to understand those 3 hats. But then I thought, actually, we can collectively, all 3 of those hats basically have one sole focus, and that is to grow Māori workforce. But they just have a slight variation on it. So Kia ora Hauora has 5 key areas that they focus on. And I feel like I'm talking too much.
I'll sit down if that's okay. So as Lonnie mentioned, Kia ora Hauora focuses on promoting health careers within the DHB to rangatahi Māori. And part of the way that we do that is 1, through promoting health careers, 2, through promoting success in science, so promoting science achievement. And then the other 3 are related to kind of reporting and also transitioning our rangatahi into university and then eventually into the workforce. The background of the program is such that we had established it 10 years ago, and unfortunately it just kind of stayed there while everything else grew. So that is why you probably haven't heard of us. So the key aims for us as an organisation is pretty much to be the face to go into schools and promote health careers, talking about allied health and clinical roles and the pathways that students can take to get into there, whether it be about pastoral support, specific subjects or subjects that they have to take to be able to get into university as prerequisites. And then when they've gone into university, how do they navigate the daily things of adulting or being a second chance learner, scholarships and accommodation, those types of things. And it is a shame that Dr. Oz actually just left. I just noted a few things down. So, he was talking about hesitancy within our communities towards the COVID vaccine, and we're actually in a prime position to be able to talk to that and communicate it within, simple language to our community through schools and through some of the programs that we're wanting to develop. One of them being wanting to engage with whānau marae, so engaging parents, and others collaborating with people such as yourselves, bringing you into the school so that actually the clinical expertise is there as well to answer any questions about whatever it is that your profession is, whether it be dietitian or so on and so forth. So that's on the school bit. Yep.
So just keeping within the school bit, one of the, originally, Kia ora Hauora only looked at year 11, 12, 13s. So they're basically looking at those ones who are getting ready to go on to varsity and so forth. But then the more we spoke with the sector, so this is them coming in there, who've also stood in front of some of these kids because they're doing the promotional stuff, promoting the careers. And then when we talk with our career guidance counsellors, etc., most of them were saying that basically it needs to go down further. It's not start at year 11, 12, 13. So part of what Taylor and I have been looking at this year is what's sustainable and can feed from underneath. So we're trialling going back down to year 7, 8, 9 and 10s. And so when you 7, 8s are your Form 1 and 2s of the old days, and 3 and 4, 9 and 10. Anyway, as we start to look in that area, and you're also thinking about what actually is available. So if we just stick with promoting health careers and the first two components, because those are ones that you can support with at those lower levels, and then supporting science achievement. So then it means we have to have and now I feel like I've just gone bang, 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 bang. When I come back to the first bit, which was, this is about promoting Māori health careers. So it's not a short-term plan. And this contract has always been, for us, we finish on December 17th. So as we think about it in terms of the wider picture, from year 7s all the way through, because Hauora Māori Training Fund can take us all the way to adulthood, those who are in the sector. So if we think of it in that, in those terms, then it's about everything that we put in place to ensure that that supports it. In terms of the schools, we were looking at, because we finish on December 17th, so what's sustainable there once we finish and we're gone? And secondly, because I am from Kura Kaupapa background, what Māori medium services do we have that are sustainable for the long term? So everything we've looked at in terms of this, so that there's 3 science areas that are specific to health. We've had support through Victoria University. They're happy to do some mentorship and run some courses. But then you have some STEM programs. Every town has a STEM program. There's only one Indigenous STEM program that's run in Aotearoa, and that's down at Massey University, called Pūhoro. Now, Pūhoro, but I only focus on year 10, 11, 12, 13. I went there 2 weeks ago to look at the Pūhoro program, because our Tōnui one wants to feed the feeders from 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's the sustainability of it. Will it still stand once we're gone? The positions are gone. And to ensure that we will be supporting those schools for the ultimate outcome to get, because we've done it this way, it may not be exclusively health, but it was still about ensuring sustainability and support to get towards the ultimate outcome, which is either employed or health. Although we do it through the position of Kia ora Hauora, we were taking a more holistic, wider view of it. The second component, at the same time I went down to look at Pūhoro, I went over to Taranaki, because they have a program called Waiora, which started about the same time as Kia ora Hauora, but started on a very different, that's the second part I suppose I want to leave with us as Hauora Tairāwhiti, is that one, if we agree this is worth doing, is ensuring that we lift the Māori workforce, then it's got to be something with the vision of something like the Hauora program to ensure its sustainability over time. So they didn't take any personal funding, but they did have commitment and buy-in through MSD, through so-and-so, such all these other organisations that ensured that it still runs to this day, that it supports and it gets bigger and bigger right across. Because part of that, it's not just about them getting into training. So when they, in schools, once they get into tertiary, then we need cadetships, we need internships, we need them to actually be, this I know as a teacher, once you see it long enough, if you're familiar with it, it's not just about saying this is an exciting career, but actually feel the space, go into the workspace and feel it as a student leading into, you might decide halfway through, actually I don't want to do this, but you saw something else in the hospital and changed your mind and decided to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to say this is the bigger, wider, longer vision. If we are being honest about growing the Māori workforce, they're not compartmentalised into little bits and pieces, and then we just deal with those sort of things.
So is there a trainer component, like in the sustainable space in schools, you've got somebody that picks it up?
Shadow techs and all of those sorts of things. Yep, but currently that's how it sort of is done, is with those three hats, because Kia ora Hauora does a component, but if you want to be pono to that whole whakaaro from here to here, you'd take a stance like Hauora have, which is pair up with those who can ensure that you'll get that wider picture. Basically, we're just fulfilling contracts. That's all we're doing. Kia ora Hauora, Ora Māori Training Fund and so forth. But if you want to be real about building that picture sustainably long-term, look at what's out there and available. The other thing we were looking at was what's available, because we had COVID. So in terms of training, so there's other things like if we weren't able to run a career expo, there's Inspiring Futures, and these are organisations that are already doing things out there, but it's just holding hands with them and just finding what resources you need and who can do this. The other way we were looking at it was what was sustainable right across can we access it wherever we were in the country? Someone might hear about it happening over here, but can they still access it down there? And the other bit being, is it delivered in Māori medium as well as in both sides?
Can I just ask a question about schools? So we're working with local schools. Do we do anything with schools where there are cohorts of rangatahi who whakapapa here, like Māori boarding schools?
And the other exciting thing we learned at Hauora, they have a MOU with the boards of the schools, every board of the schools. And so there's a direct feed in. All of those students meet with every university, they know every one of the students in their district, and they feed into, so everything that comes through the town, through Tairāwhiti, whether it comes from Auckland University, what was the one in Victoria, Otago, they have a direct in to every.
It just seems like our girls went through Hokarere, and there were lots of Tairāwhiti kids who went through Hokarere. And it seems to me if they whakapapa here, they've got a different nature of connection that may bring them back to work here if we can get their attention early.
The only way it would come up on our radar is if they register. Even if they register there, so we've had ones who've registered, might be in Waikato, but are here physically. It's all to do with where you're physically based. If you're physically based here, then, or they might register from the South Island, but they're physically based here. And they may have registered down there because they're at Otago University. But if they're physically based here, well, this is where you come back to do your cadetships or your internships.
I might just also touch on the perception of our communities, of the hospital, in terms of the way that we engage with them and create our relationships. To talk to the conversations that I've had with some of the careers advisors and some of the teachers within the kura, they're saying, I would really, really love to come here see what the hospital was like, but also for those of us who live rurally, whether it be towards Motumaitini or up the coast, it's really difficult for them to come this way. If the only time that they get to see the hospital in action is when we have career expos, and those are really resource intensive. It costs $55 an hour to get a reliever, and it costs between $2,000 and $3,500 just to hire a bus and make your way up. So what we'd like to see and what we'd like to develop is having us as the face for the DHB, and to also be able to provide opportunities and the understanding that if they register with us, they can come in here and have a look at what we do. Because to the best of my knowledge, we don't have that. We come in a big bang, and then what's happening in the rest of the year. And don't get me wrong, career expos are fun, and they're really good opportunities to be able to see what's out there, but actually there's too much going on at the same time. What we'd like to do is create avenues for students to come here, see what we do, know that they've got somewhere to come back to after they've finished their studies, and then also for them to see that we have a vested interest in our community, and that we're going out there to see what they're doing at school level, perhaps what they're doing at a marae, to be able to engage whānau on that level. And I just want to touch on the point again about hesitancy. Hesitancy comes from a lack of informed consent, or informed knowledge base, right? So health literacy being the concept here that we're wanting to really promote. I really think that our clinicians have a really, really high level of knowledge, not so good at communicating it out sometimes, especially given the fact that when you come in and have an appointment, you're there for half an hour. And that's a lot of information to be able to pass to someone and expect that they're going to remember all of that. So use us, is what I'm saying. We have a lot of time, because that's our job, to go out there and consistently send the message out, and to be able to break it down in layman's terms.
Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, another organisation I'm involved with is the Connects Trust, and one of the things we recognise through that is the difficulty with two subjects at school, maths and science. And there's a reluctance to teach the subject, both subjects, and there's a reluctance to take the subjects on. So what the House of Science is doing is trying to demystify it a bit with the kits that we send out to all the schools. And in those kits, there's a subject content which gives the teacher instructions on how to teach from that kit, with experiments and all that. And they're really fun boxes in that. And the whole aim of that is to get that word science kind of demystified a bit, because I think there's reluctance to take on these subjects because of that, science, I don't want to borrow that. So that's coming right in at a lower level. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of success with that. Those kits are going all the way up the coast and all that. So
I think we also acknowledge organisations like Tōnui Kaulea, because they work from that year 1 to year 6, so from J1 all the way to Form 2. And the whole idea is that we're just not engaging early enough. We're engaging when they get to year 11, 12, 13, but actually that's when they're meant to have these subjects there. They're meant to have them cemented then, and it's too late. One of the things I often talk about is making science sexy, because a student from Boys High is not going to drop their sports and physical education for physics. So we have been doing some work around that space as well, and engaging with particularly the faculties of science within the universities to see what extra resources they can support our teachers who teach locally here. Because I know that, sorry.
Sorry, I was just wondering if, so Tukahika is the pastoral program that's set up in Otago, and they originally travelled to remote areas, schools particularly, to do CSI type sexy science projects. We're still doing that, one. science in schools relies on science teachers. What's your understanding of the sciences teaching availability, particularly in our rural communities?
So we know that we do have science teachers. Within Gisborne City, there are only 2 that are Māori though. And we think that it's really important for our kids to have a face that they can relate to. It's not the be all or end all. You can still achieve greatly with having non-Māori teaching Māori kids, but I think that the thing that's missing there is that link towards, you know, what's actually important within their lives and relating it. Yes. So I'm just talking because I'm actually starting to be a teacher at the moment, and science is going to be one of my subjects that I teach. So
do we know what
the other thing is that when I've already mentioned, Pūhoro is the only Indigenous STEM program in Aotearoa. So they're at the pump, and they only do from years 11, 12, 13, which is why we were stoked that Tairāwhiti wants to come underneath, because they don't want to do what's already been greatly done. But because they're the only one, that means the whole country utilises that one unit in terms of their specialist field being in science, but more importantly, Indigenous science, because there's not much mātauranga Māori training out there when it comes to health. So that one is huge to us. And that Tairāwhiti are prepared to partner and come underneath and do the year 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, that's what they would like to work towards. Becomes a focus for us in this district for other towns to come or they get out and go into those towns. So that's how it currently works. You get these one-off, like a bit of a career expo show where they come out, do something with you and then go back in. It's how do we sustain it in-house when they've gone.
Josh, you've got a question.
Sorry.
A few things. Hei tēnā korua, nei ratimihi nunui ki a korua, mō korua kōrero, I tukuna mai ki a mātou ngā me mō te poari nei. Thank you very much for your guys' kōrero. Always been a huge fan of Kia ora, Hauora. For context, I've 2 girls that 2 of my daughters are looking at going into the health field. I'm trying to aki them along in regards to that. Have enjoyed the previous stuff that Eru Finlay had delivered around Kia ora, Hauora, and I forget her name, but the previous person before her have attended the Tūkahika hui and the Mapis hui from Auckland University as well with my daughters. You did note that the contract would be finishing up in December. I was just wanting to ask a point of clarification. Is that funding from Central? Is that how those roles are funded, Whānau? That's trying to a general question to the table, I guess.
The national program, Josh, was originally planned in collaboration with DHB and Ministry. It comes out of Health Workforce New Zealand, so it was sliced out of some of that original funding. And the nature of its annual turnover is the nature of those sorts of agreements that are set at a central place. That may change now that we have a drive that sees the whole devolution of some of those decision-making to locality.
But I think what I was trying to extend upon, Josh, was that over in Waiora, so yes, there's those annual contracts, etc., but they've gone beyond the contract and they've put a stake in the ground and said, we want to grow Māori capacity. So that's why they seek outside funding to ensure that happens, and they watch it literally, they call it from the cradle to the grave. And so, and I think currently the way we operate is that we're just doing contract for contract. But if you want to be real about, if that's what you were trying to actually working towards is growing that capacity, then put a stake in the ground and say this is over and above the contract, I suppose.
Sure, you may not be aware, but actually we do contribute more than just the Kia ora Hauora funding as a DHB. So we have increased, and that's why we've got 2 people now than what we had 1 person before. So we have gone above the contract that we get through Kia ora Hauora. I've been aware of that, yeah.
Okay. Just a comment. Kia ora to you, Taylor, and to Dunedin. Thank you for coming. I'm so glad that there is a more holistic and comprehensive approach to growing Māori health workforce. So in the early days, I'm going back about 5 years, there were careers days and people used to come into the hospital, leave, and that was it. And we were never sure of the benefit for those Māori rangatahi and whānau and the community. When you look at, for me, the biggest requirement is just a love of your environment, what's around you, supported by your whānau and the people you interact mostly with. So how do you translate that? It's looking at parakore, the recycling, sustainability. It's looking at growing our kai, marakai. And from that very early beginning, which a lot of our mokopuna grow up with in the rural areas, is how do you then move that through the system? And so it still concerns me that, we are trying to do a huge task contract by contract. And that would be my concern. There is a place, there's different strokes for different folks. But the concern I have is that we still need to do more to get Māori rangatahi into health. And I'm not sure that we're anywhere near where we need to be.
Oh, no,
Certainly we need to start younger, below year 7 to 10 even. And I think that's where you'll find a lot of the kura kaupapa, their focus is on year 1 right through to year 13. And it has to be a whānau approach. And for all of that, we need to do better.
I think it also must reflect whatever we're learning and we're going on to be must reflect our worldview, which is why I promoted the Pūhoro one, because I went down there and had a look at it 2 weeks ago. There's not one kid on the East Coast that wouldn't pass every one of those classes because it's reflective of a lifestyle that they're already currently living on the East Coast. Might not be so familiar to kids who are living in the city, but all that knowledge, pūtaiao, they'll know intimately.
Could I just make one kind of final comment, is that the whole reason we're bringing up Pūhoro, and I didn't think I explained it well earlier with your pātai te kōka, is that we are currently under-resourced as far as teachers who can teach specialist science subjects are, even within the city. And so the whole point of bringing about the idea of Pūhoro and about tōnui is that when we're gone and someone else picks up the new contract for Kia ora Hauora, is that those people will be there to keep on supporting our new Kia ora Hauora coordinator and also our teachers by extension. Because really it's just about linking them with as much support as they can to do their job, because it's already hard enough as it is being under-resourced. So Pūhoro is also doing a talk to Hawke's Bay, and they're on the final phases of the DHB, I mean, and they're on the final phases of pushing that through. And I've brought up to Peter Brown that actually they're looking at coming here next year. So that's why we're having this big kōrero about what they do and why they're beneficial to our community.
Can I just actually mention when you first started that you wanted to meet with T1 first?
Sorry, no, I didn't want to. I thought that was the prerequisite to us coming here.
Well, I just wanted to ask if you are working closely with like some of the iwi committees and how we could support you better on those committees.
No, we're working for Kia ora Hauora inside Hauora Tairāwhiti.
There's been a lot of other groundwork that's had to be done, seeing as like what we said, it hasn't evolved from where it was way back when. So a lot of it's been admin, and a lot of it has been trying to just kind of figure out who's who within the hospital and within our wider country who can support us, put they on the radar.
Because we'd like to total support with you.
I think it's, from my perspective, it's encouraging that the health sector reforms signal a really strong commitment to building the Māori health workforce. And so I think that's kind of, we need to be driving the mahi that we do towards the whole of system. really encouraged by the things that you're talking about the sort of wider cross-agency commitment to this. And so that's certainly something that, that as you signal is, an option for sustainability. So I think those kinds of things, what the future system will look like and the role of others in that system are really important things to look at going forward. So tēnā kōrua, thank you very much for joining us today. All the best, and kia kaha to our rangatahi who you're
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Okay. Right. So we're going to circle back now to our procedural parts of the meeting. We do have another guest joining us at 11:30, by which time we will be in public excluded. So we need to make sure that we push through our public agenda to that point. Just item 2.1, the schedule of interest. If anyone's got any updates, if they can forward them through to Rachel. And item 2.2, does anyone have any conflicts in relation to agenda items today? Carl? Okay. Item 3.1 is our minutes from our public session on the 30th of March. They're at page 8 of the board book. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? Carl? Okay, so if we move to adopt those minutes from that meeting, are there any matters arising from the minutes? Jim, can I pass to you for the action item? And also particularly, can you update us on the Consumer Council, which we had originally thought we would be getting an update from Nikki at this meeting? Yeah, okay. So just going through them, there is, you'll see there that instant review has been completed around that particular event. Still wanting to get from our Director of Mental Health Services a short summary of that. So we're on to try and get that written for you. Danette and it's done. The Consumer Council. So Nikki has been working on that in conjunction with our consumer leads that's on the Clinical Governance Committee, but also that is something that the clinical lead, the professional clinical leads have seen as a task that they can assist Nikki with and keep progressing on that. So a bit of an update on that later. The bowel screening updates went to Hiwi Tarangi, and if you want it again here, then we can certainly give that as well. And also the next one there about alcohol-related ED presentations, pros and cons about extending the data collection. I think that was to extend it across age range or something like that, wasn't it? Yeah, so we're seeing how we can do that, so we won't let that one drop off there. The Tracer app information, Nicola, how are you going with that?
I have been trying to find the right person within the ministry groups. They have changed somewhat over the last 2 or 3 months, so it's a moving feast as to who has oversight of the information we're seeking there. So I'm still waiting to get some feedback, detailed firstly. Can they bring it down to Tairāwhiti utilisation, and then under that it was what was the use at R&B.
Okay, code of conduct is made. It was in terms of putting that into a document for Tairāwhiti. FSAs, there's an item on the agenda about that for ENT, and the Safe One patient events still hasn't been completed, the review of that.
Does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, if we move to 5.1, there's no correspondence in the board pack. Since the board pack was furnished, we have received, and I've provided you with an updated letter of expectations from the Minister arising from the health sector reforms. So I think what we'll do is have a fuller discussion on the reforms a bit later in the meeting. And then once we've done that, then bring that letter through into public papers. Okay. The performance dashboard at page 16. If I pass this to you, Jim, I did just have one question at the outset. The significant shift in newborns enrolled in general practice. I'm presuming, is this correcting a reporting issue?
Yes,
Right.
correct. Yeah, so we were always persistently low on that indicator and investigated why that may be the case and found that actually we were not collecting the data. Yeah, we were doing better in reporting. I can also update that the immunisation stats have improved since that time as well. So we're now looking that our overall immunisation rate at 8 months has gone up to 87% now. So that was a 2% increase on the previous month, and the rate of decline is dropped as well. So this is good news, and we're expecting or hoping that will, not hoping, designing that will continue to improve in that way. I'll take any other questions on points that you've gotten on those indicators.
For me, it's the readmission rate for the over 75. It brings us up every month or so. I'm not convinced it is looked at the M&M meetings. I've kind of done a little bit of investigation. I'm not sure it is. I want reassurance that it's not related to poor discharge planning, because what you hear in the community is there is some poor discharge planning, and for over 75s, while they are likely to have readmissions, the rate is still too high for me.
Yeah, so we were doing a little bit of work on that, Heather, so we'll bring that back here. Yeah.
My question is in respect to the Better Help for Smokers to Quit framework. I know that there's a push to, or there's a promotion around vaping as the alternative, a better alternative in respect to smoking cigarettes, and there's still work being done in the tobacco space. Are we going to be asked at some point to monitor the impacts of vaping? Where is that going to fit into some framework? Because we're having a few people query the concerns of parents because of young people's uptake of vaping. Is that coming on stream?
So the Ministry of Health.
Sorry.
No, I was saying I think that's referenced in the Chief Executive's report.
Yeah,
there's a section in there, but did you want
the Ministry of Health is supporting as a stop smoking or cessation approach.
Yeah.
That vaping is one of the selected products that people can use.
Yeah.
It is not saying we are promoting vaping.
Vaping is
It is to enable, there've been a number of research programs on Māori women, one of our high population areas, and Māori women who are pregnant.
Yes.
So vaping overall is not being actively supported or promoted. What's happening is that as a selection such as gums and other types of cessation products, it is being considered in the pot.
Yeah. Apologies on passing this report. Sorry. Thank you.
And yes, young people will also pick up smoking, and they will pick up all those sorts of habits that we don't want them to pick up on. And so it's about how we think about looking after the risk factors for young people.
Kia ora.
No? Okay. Thank you, Jim. Now move to 6.2, which is my report. So I'll just touch on some things in this section, and then some fuller discussion on some of these in our public exploratory session. So as we all know, the main issue for the month was the announcement of our sector reforms last week. Just by way of brief summary over all the key aspects of the reforms, the consolidation of all DHBs into a single agency from 1 July next year, the establishment of a Māori Health Agency with a direct commissioning role, and also a co-commissioning role alongside Health New Zealand. It'll also basically have a policy watch and a monitoring function. And I think really importantly in the wider Māori health sort of space, Māori and iwi partnership boards will have a more formalised role in that space, and that will include agreed priorities with Health New Zealand. So there'll be quite a strong set of local voice and specific Māori Health Agency influence and action in there. There will also be a public health agency. The policy function of that will be established within the ministry, and the implementation function, which will bring together the 12 public health units, will sit inside Health New Zealand. In terms of timeframes, the legislation will be passed by 1 July 2022. So that's when...
1 April. Legislation passed by April next year.
But effective from 1 July.
Yeah.
So that's when the structural changes will occur. In the meantime, there'll be interim agencies set up. So there'll be an interim Health New Zealand and interim Māori Health Agency. There'll also be interim governance arrangements put together. So the governance arrangements will include the boards of those agencies, regional arrangements, so for each of the 4 divisions under Health New Zealand. We're not entirely sure yet what the lines on the map will be for those divisions, so that will come out of the interim agency. What that will mean for us is the DHB board will stay in place. Well, there is a DHB, so we will stay in place until the changeover at 1 July. But we will also have an interim regional governance board that will be needing to be really getting its feet under the desk, understanding the sector and the nuances across the region, and really getting up to speed and being ready to run on the 1st of July rather than being at the starting gate on the 1st of July. And so for us, that will mean, I think, a lot of support going into how we can make sure that within our or here, those regional governance arrangements, the interim ones, are as strong as possible. And I think that's a really important thing that we can do to support the reforms. And of course, we'll have the continued oversight of the delivery of health services up until that point in time. I think, I was really, really delighted with the reforms announcements. I thought they were really great. I see a huge amount of potential for us here and indeed for other small DHBs in terms of having a national health service essentially. One of the really big ones that we know that we've talked about a lot in best meetings is our struggle with attracting specialist staff, and having a single agency will mean that we will have, there will be a single workforce that we, as a campus of that workforce, will have access to. And I just see that as, one of the really, really big gains for our community is that there will be a much bigger workforce that will be able to and then also a whole lot of the other things that are very time intensive for us that will be, if they're managed nationally, it will just, free us up to do other things like our IT infrastructure and, that kind of thing. If all of that kind of thing is managed at a national level, it'll mean that we don't have to, the regional governance doesn't have to attend to those kinds of business management type things. And the very strong emphasis on Māori health given our population makeup is, again, a really positive thing for our community. So I think going forward over the next 14 months, that we're just going to have to be really agile and really constructive and understand that there will be necessarily changes to the nature of the work of this board over the coming 14 months. And we can talk a bit more about that a bit later in the meeting. And just also, just a couple of other things from me. So during the course of the month, we met with the National Party Health Team. We had a breakfast here. It was a meeting that was endorsed by the Minister's Office. This was just before the announcements. I think it was the Friday before.
Friday before, yeah.
It was a really great meeting, really enjoyed meeting with them. They were, really interested, really, as you would have seen in the media, concerned about the loss of local voice with the potential for amalgamation. I think there is some very specific consideration being given to local voice, and there's facts that are available on the DPMC website. And they were very particularly refreshed about our approach to the vaccination program and how we're thinking of vaccination on a community basis. So they were really refreshed by that. We attended the breakfast that was hosted by Tairāwhiti, launching their comms program in relation to the vaccination program, and that was coincided with a visit by Minister Hinari. So Minister Hinari came up on basically a vaccination tour to come and talk with communities about vaccination. So he also attended the breakfast and then went up to Tairāwhiti, had a community hui there, and then came back to Gisborne and had one here, which Dr. and I attended the community hui here in Gisborne. Those are probably the main things from me. Oh, and just the other thing, we did host a range of meetings with the ministry earlier this month, which we'll have a fuller talk about a bit later in the meeting as well. So if anyone's got any questions for me. Carl? Okay. Item 6.3 is the report from the Chair of Te Waiora o Nuku Miha. So Na is not here today. He's been riding quite close with me on the reforms. So he attended the reforms announcements in Wellington last Wednesday, and as you can imagine, is very excited by the opportunities they present. Josh, can I pass to you if there's anything you want to feedback from the Te Waiora o Nuku Miha?
I think the most significant thing was actually something that Heather came and presented to Te Waiora Nuku Taimimeha about, which was around cultural auditing. It's an audit program that's currently running through our FRAC committee in regards to, I guess, a cultural lens over our policies and procedures and stuff. I mean, if I'm happy for Heather to maybe mention or expand in regards to that, but out of all of the papers that were on the agenda for Te Waiora Nuku Taimimeha, that was probably the most specific one to that committee. There were other things that were on the cards, but they also come up in Hiwi Te Rangi, and I would kind of expand on those ones when it comes time to talk about the subcommittee reports. So if Heather's okay with kind of giving us some more brief about, or were you waiting for FRAC to do that, Heather?
No, work now. So for me, I think it's important, for me, it's my white perspective, that we will have something sitting on our shoulder that for all our audits that we need to know, is this whatever we're looking at looks at culture, equity and the treaty. So I've learned over the last 10 years really that we should all have that in our psyche, but if it's not specifically asked, it's not in our psyche. So Yana does the Haushi audit for the Midland for Tairāwhiti. And so if we're doing like a privacy audit, for example, we need to be thinking, does this reduce inequity or increase it? Does it cover the cultural perspective? Is it meeting the needs of the Treaty of Waitangi? And while it might not be her asking those questions, it's sorting out a process for it. So for me, there's those three things that always should be in people's thinking. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I know it from, but I'm not sure if I can express it. So we went to T1 to ask if they could help with that. Like I could ask the questions, but they'd be from my perspective, not the proper perspective and the process around that. And I think it would also be good to have those same things as checkpoints in all our policies and guidelines as well, which isn't there at the moment. So if I'm writing a guideline, have I thought about those three things?
Does anyone have any questions of Heather? Okay, Jim, we'll pass to you the Chief Executive's report, which is at page 18 of the board pack.
Thank you, Kim. Just highlight the month there around, it's quite relevant in relationship to the korero of Donette and Taylor earlier on there around increasing numbers of Māori who are on staff at Hauora Tairāwhiti, and you can see that we have been making some progress, but in many respects there we are a little bit hampered by the pipeline really, and being able to get, so hence the work that Donette and Taylor are doing right from the, trying to extend that backwards to be able to make sure that we have got young Māori who are able to come into the health system, and also, and thinking that's in health professional careers, but across the whole spectrum of the workforce that we have within health. And that enables us to be able to then pick those up, because some of our roles you absolutely have to have your piece of paper to say you are a health professional, for instance, and that is hampering that. So good to see that progress going on there, and also the work that we've also been talking about with Polytech about getting better access to some health professional careers here in Tairāwhiti through the national Polytech system as well will be another important part of that. Financially, result was over budget for the month, but around about what we have been expecting, and certainly with our additional accruals that we have got in there, and some of that revenue that we haven't recognised as yet. And we've got a bit of a breakdown there on the bottom of page 19 around what some of those areas are. We've been reporting that through our projections, which come up later in the financial report to the end of the year to the Ministry of Health, to make sure that they are aware of what our overall and our business as usual position will be at the end of the year, and they are signalling comfort around that at the moment, but obviously they'd like better, but understanding about where we are heading to, and we're not slackening up on our work to control those costs and to improve our revenue. Just the usual looking pattern there around throughput through the DHB, a little bit better this month in terms of some of our acute admits, up, but not too far off the trend line there in terms of our acute admits, and certainly as we've seen before, take the edge off that. We are experiencing some quite large peaks at present through the hospital, and so that's keeping the pressure on in terms of being able to manage that. I put in a graph there that you haven't seen possibly before or for a little while anyway, on page 24 around our conversion rate of admissions of people attending the emergency department into being admitted, and you will see that there is a downward trend on that, which is good. However, and that does reflect the work that is going on within our emergency department, the skill mix that we've got there, and the work also going on within services through our medical registrars, etc., to be able to provide more definitive care for people at the front door rather than them being admitted to hospital, which is helping with our stalling that increasing rate of acute admissions. However, it also, as you know, tells the story a little bit around the graph a little bit further up the page, at the bottom of page 23 there, of the increasing numbers of people coming to the emergency department, and some of those people would benefit from coming to primary care instead. So we're still doing that work with primary care around trying to work through that, some solutions around that. Planned care, we are still seeing higher rates of people coming through planned care, but as reporting later shows, we've still got some particular catch-up areas that we're needing to attend. So planned care, we've got that's a very similar number of people waiting longer than 4 months for first specialist assessments and for treatment. There is quite a bit of work going on around some areas in that for ORL or ENT is one area there where we have got additional resources coming in from Lakes DHB, and just this weekend another opportunity there for a number of people to be seen within that, and looking at what coming through from that, what treatment options there may be for some of those people as well. I think that's...
Is it the second round of weekend
special
clinics?
Yes, it is.
I've just got a question. Well, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but in terms of numbers coming into the ED, and now that we're heading towards winter, I guess that really sort of emphasises to us the importance of making sure that with all of the additional work that we as a sector are going to have to do with the vaccination program, that we make sure that there continues to be availability of primary to look after that sort of first line of defence. Otherwise our EDs are just going to go up and up and up if people can't get to a doctor.
That is part of the discussions that we're having with primary care in being able to sort of utilise the resource that we've got to best effect. Now, primary care are the experts in primary care, and so we need to try and maximise the capacity within our primary care systems to be able to get as many people seen there rather than coming to the hospital. And also there's the other immunisation programs. There's things like cervical screening program, for instance. We want to make sure those sorts of areas are maintained consistently across the winter, and then manage the numbers of people who traditionally are unwell in winter. And Oz mentioned before the experience in the Northern Hemisphere as being lower rates of influenza and respiratory illnesses. And while we expect that to be the case here this winter, we can't rely on that. We need to have that capacity within primary care.
Well, anecdotally, we've heard that there's been a demand for flu vaccine. So that's been unusual.
As compared to the Northern Hemisphere, aren't we under a whole lot more mobile freedom than anyone else?
Yes, but the point is that influenza is much less likely, to come from overseas, to come into our population. So it swings from each hemisphere as the winter goes. It swings backwards and forwards. So we're not exporting our new variants to the Northern Hemisphere, and the Northern Hemisphere is not exporting their new variants to the Southern Hemisphere. But the vaccination program will be important for older people, and that's where it's starting out. It's already in place within primary care, and we really want primary care to get into that. And of course, the issue with the COVID-19 vaccination program is the issues around, it's just, as we discussed before, logistics of that, and it lends itself to really mass opportunities for people to get vaccinated.
I guess I just wanted to make that comment, I guess really just to say that we do see and understand the challenges of making sure we get the best possible vaccination program alongside the best possible ongoing care in the community, and not a whole lot of additional ED presentations coming in. Sandra.
I just had one question around your planned care production section of your report. We're ahead in target in relation to first specialist assessments, but then I suspect less compliant is the I2 and 5. Where does that leave a lot of our patients, given that they get a specialist appointment that says you need X, but you're not going to get X for well outside the waiting time?
Well, that's where we need to have that capacity for the treatment end. So what we're seeing at the moment is we're doing a lot of catch up for people who've been waiting. So naturally, that's why we're overproducing around first specialist assessments. But then, of course, there's a proportion of those people who have a first specialist assessment, as you're seeing, that then go on and go into being requiring treatment. So you're seeing that in that graph there around people who are needing treatment, and I can't see which page that is on. So yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So then we have to make sure we've got the capacity, because there's no point in putting people there if you're not actually, and we've got to provide that within 4 months. So that's where that additional capacity within areas like ENT is designed to relieve that as well. But yeah, we need to get the FSAs first, so then you know what you're dealing with.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know it's part of a bigger conversation, but I'd like to think that the health reforms are going to address exactly this, because I mean, at our core, we're about looking after people's overall well-being, and knowing that the chances are you're not going to get whatever procedure has been recommended in the boundaries that we currently set ourselves can only be frustrating.
So the Minister it's been one of the messages that he's really been pushing, is that through the reforms, regardless of where you live, that won't affect the quality of care that you get. Like he's been, he's very deliberately called it postcode lottery. I personally don't use that term, because I think that within the scope of capacity and workforce we have available to us, we provide very, very good care. But our issue is that capacity and workforce availability, where we get things like long wait times on, some of the specialist treatment. So he has been very clear that the reforms are amongst other things, intended to address the the high degree of variability in things like wait times.
I might just pick one that I can just on the issue of some of the waiting lists, predominantly ENT. So I've had some discussions with the group manager of the services to see there's currently quite a lot of spare capacity available within Auckland. I've been having some discussions with some private providers, which we're discussing in the latter part of the meeting today. But there is capacity to do that, and I think it's because they are all outpatient type procedures. It's easier for us to get it done, and with a specialist who is actually specializing in that particular area, and then bring the patient back in here. So we'll probably need to have a bit more of a discussion whether that is something that we should pursue. But there is currently quite a lot of capacity out there in specialties like ENT, urology, and a little bit in ophthalmology. But there is capacity, and most of the bigger public hospitals have been using this private providers as a catch-up. But it's something to discuss. There is a cost involved, and but for our patients, I think it's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's always a cost versus practicality discussion. I'd just like to think that in the interests of our communities, more provincial, that we're able to maybe redress the balance. Because cost, I think, has come before practicality in some cases.
Yeah, look, in the long term, I think it'll be addressed. As Kim rightly mentioned, with the healthcare reform, when we have one single workforce, we don't need to start negotiating with people. Exactly. Will solve it. But I think for the immediate outcome, for the next 3 to 6 months, there's not much point putting people onto a list and they have no chance of getting surgery in the next 6 to 12 months. It's pointless. We need to get that done, and we'll work on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just, when I look at this conversation around the numbers wise, overall, are we as a region, do we have high need in, say, ENT, or is it across New Zealand it's the same? Like in respect to our region, are there the data that we collect, does it tell us what are the main diseases, infections with respect to this region? Are we a higher populace dealing with ear, nose and throat issues based on, our lifestyle here in Tairāwhiti? Does this data qualify You know, some of the key issues are, we know we've got high rates of diabetic, but that's across New Zealand, but also heart disease. So just to kind of get down to pinpointing this region needs these, or is it just we're all in the same mix as a whole nation across all of New Zealand? Like, we're not special having more ENT needs, or, you know what I mean? Like, say, like I know for this region, we often talk about respiratory issues. And you know, we often get asked, is it due to the pollen of tree, you know, all the indicators that lead to these infections or issues. So as a region, are we above average on ENT needs, or is it all in the mix?
I'm not sure about the ENT bits of it, but in general, as you'll be aware, from an acuity perspective, we do have a higher incidence of cardiovascular, renal disease, all those things. I'm not sure about the ENT bit, but the total number of patients is still quite small in terms of the ones that don't require surgery or specialist appointments and then a surgery. It's still the volume. It's only 50,000 population. There's a small group that eventually end up requiring all these interventions. And it is something that's the main problem for us, is that we don't have a specialist and capacity here to deal with that. So if we had two specialists in ENT, would be able to do that. Similarly, for urology, we just need a specialist here at least once every 2 weeks to clear that list, but we don't have that. So it's mainly that demand capacity. Personally, I don't think our demand is significantly different from other regions, but we do have a higher burden of disease.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is these two fine people are working out health literacy. So if our region, you know, there was this notion on these are the issues, obviously bad eating and not exercising enough across all humans, but just regionally, I was looking at it wondering, what do we need to do better in for us as a Tairāwhiti? But if it's, you know, say heart disease is one of those things and we're trying to do our best with it, then cool. Thank you.
And step out of the room, sorry. So we're talking about the ENT?
No, we're still
Not
on,
yet, but
on
we're
the
still
chief
on
executive's
Chief's
report.
But that we're touching on the ENT clinic we had? Okay.
It hasn't come
We're
up
talking about the CE's report. We've got a separate paper on the ENT. But if you've got something on,
Well, I thought it linked in with what we were talking about. Sorry, I'll raise it then.
Okay.
Can I ask Jim on page 30? This is the Plan Care Rolling Reports. I wasn't sure of, as a board member, what are the issues for me to look at with that data?
It's just giving you it's the same data of the report that's above that, because you've got the same there, total assured greater than 4 months, 132. So that column is the same as the base column along. So it's just a different view of the same data. So the one on the bottom of page 22 is 29, I should say, is the one that's got it month by month going back to November 2020, split by specialty, and the same, and then the next one, the Plan Care Rolling Reports, there is giving you the total numbers of people who are in the system.
Okay.
So 583 total, and then there's 97 people with endoscopy, waiting for endoscopy, and 496 for surgery. That's the total number of people waiting. And then of those people waiting, 132 currently longer than 4 months.
Okay, so do we have a problem with capacity with endoscopies or no?
No, not with endoscopy. And you'll see that with the report early in the dashboard that we are seeing those people as per the timeframes required.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We will note and receive your financial report. You've covered the key parts of finances in your report, and I think importantly for us, signalling that you've been in touch with the ministry about our forecasting to the end of the year. Is there anything further that you want to raise on the financial report, either you or Craig, to run us through?
Craig?
Just a couple of comments on page 42, Kim. Capital program, so we're currently adverse 324k. It's combined of our depreciation budget and also our carry forward from prior year. It's been decreasing month on month, so that should be bang on budget come year end. Cash flow is holding up. We've got 5.1 million in the bank. We've got requests down with the Ministry of Health for 1.135. That's part of our deferred capital. And Morris City demolition, the $3 million that was generously provided by the Ministry of Health. Forecast on page 43. So against plan, we're looking at adverse forecast of just over $4 million. Of that, we've got 6.874 as BAU, so 2.874 adverse against budget, and the rest
This is like
holidays,
holidays.
compliance, COVID. Yeah.
Okay.
And just on page 44, we've got the same sort of forecast out to the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, it's just carrying our year-to-date actually against budget.
Thank you. Craig, does anyone have any questions on the financial report or any comments from audit if you've discussed it with audit? Just a question from me now that we're sort of progressing now to the last 2 months of the financial year. Will we be expecting that forecast out to the end of the year to remain stable? Like are we going to get into
stable-ish, I guess.
So we're not forecasting anything unexpected in May or June?
Not that we're seeing at the moment, no. It's not going to be sort of big unknowns of the IDF outflows and farming rebates, which should be, we're forecasting the variance based on current forecasts from FarmAC until those wash-ups come through.
Okay.
We're not seeing anything exceptional at this stage.
So I just had one little question. It was, I'm guessing it relates back to the higher both ED and admission numbers that we're seeing, but it was back in your infrastructure costs, overspends in both meals and laundry services. Is that just greater numbers working their way through the hospital? I'm not sure if that's page 37, infrastructure costs.
Oh, yeah, so high numbers throughout
So it's just higher numbers through the system, right?
There's been no significant price increases, so it's
right.
Volume related.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just make one last comment on the financial report, and it's on the table at page 43. When we talked just before about our challenges and having to get in outsourced personnel and locums, our outsourced personnel costs forecast for the whole year is $7 million, and our deficit is going to be $8 million. Like this, the ability to draw on a single workforce will have a huge, I think, make a huge difference in the cost of health services that are delivered here. So, that's a really stark sort of thing to point to in our own results.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we now move to subcommittee reports. So there are no public decision items at either of the subcommittees last week. But I'll just pass to the chairs to see if there's anything that you'd like to raise with the board. Nothing from Fred. Josh from Tairāwhiti.
Yeah, I did just want to mention one specific paper. All of the papers are great, so if anyone's keen on having a look at it, then feel free to read our last Hauora agenda. But one I really wanted to specifically plug here to the general board is I'd requested of staff to provide us a paper in regards to our cervical screening in light of our friend Kiritapu Allen and her announcement around stage 3 cervical cancer. I wanted us to know where we were at in regards to cervical screening as a region, and also where we were positioned as a DHB. It was a very forthright, paper, and let me just bring it back up here. It did explain that there's a lot of things that we're doing inside of the DHB, but there's a lot that needs to kind of be done facing outwards in regards to sending the message around cervical screening. At the moment, the paper was quite shocking, for lack of a better word, in regards to some of the percentages. So Māori are 19% less likely to have a 19% less rate of going to get cervical screening than other Pacifica, and this is in region, this is regionalised data. Pacifica 22% less than other in regards to going and getting cervical screening. We're currently, as an entire globe, an entire world, we're currently talking about vaccinations, right? And we literally have a vaccine that can combat cervical or HPV, which is a contributor to cervical cancer. HPV is carried by males, and at the moment the uptake by younger teenage males to get vaccinated in order to be able to help protect our wahine population is very, very low, and that's something that needs to be increased. We did ask, and we got a very we did ask staff to see what we can do, and if that is able to be pushed through via Hiwi Te Rangi, and we have some undertakings to look at it, considering the fact that we have a huge regional program in regards to vaccination around COVID, and we have a lot of things going on in terms of health systems reform, etc., etc. It is an extra thing that we're asking staff to do. I do hope that the central government does actually make this a considered priority in regards to commsing this kaupapa out, and in regards to mobilizing a population to engage their young rangatahi males in the uptake of getting this HPV vaccine, and then also still encouraging our wahine whānau to follow through with cervical screening at the requisite times and regularly. It's important. It's absolutely important, and I really do want to commend the staff for bringing this paper to us. And yeah, and it was the most important paper on Hiwi Te Rangi. Well, they're all important, but it's the most kind of pressing, I feel, and it's one that I really wanted to mention at the board table. So kia ora tātou whānau, feel free to have a read of the agenda to get up to date in regards to the information. Notably, I wanted to make one more note. 19 women residing in Te Tairāwhiti have passed away from cervical cancer between 2000 and 2016. Of those 19, 15 of them were Māori. So just to kind of put it into perspective in regards to how I guess pressing of an issue this is for our whānau. Literally a cancer we can vaccine against. So it makes kind of sense to me. Kia ora tātou.
The other thing I have heard, and I don't know if it's gaining traction or not, is the home kit. Looking at the succession of testing. Is that a go? Do I have that wrong? Or?
Do you want to update on that too, Josh? We also talked about in the pilot program.
Yeah, we talked about the testing. There's 2 places that are being piloted at the moment. These are kind of these are the reasons why kind of I'm going, this might be a bigger thing in regards to central government, because there are 2 current self-testing pilots that are happening at the moment. One is over in Wairoa, I think, which is kind of close to us. So that also kind of is a positive indicator for us in Te Tairāwhiti as well. There were concerns that were shared by staff to us in regards to the self-test and all of that kind of stuff. But again, this is why it's a pilot, to see how it goes. And if that is a goer, then I'm sure we'll definitely hear about it.
So, and the other pilot is on the coast. So
it's the same pilot, two sites, the coast and Wairoa.
Being managed by Otago University, is that right?
Yes.
So yeah, it's something that that the Māori chairs of DHBs have been having a number of discussions about and are trying to progress with the ministry. But right at the moment, we do have a pilot site.
It was interesting paper that was stipulated last week regarding one of the hold-ups being research not being done in New Zealand, although it has been completed in Australia. And are we different?
Anyway, that's where it is right now, and there is, yes, certainly amongst Māori chiefs, a lot of support behind moving from a pilot to, you know, presuming the pilot shows the efficacy to a much wider national rollout. There are, of course, cost considerations, but we, like Josh has said, with vaccine, we think this is an important way of breaking down barriers for women to screen.
So how bold can we be as a regional DHB when it comes to the vaccine in particular? I mean, and I keep going back to being the mother of 2 teenage boys. They understand, because I had that conversation with them, why that vaccine was necessary. And it wasn't around the fact that it was just another vaccine or that they were going to be morally corrupt because they needed it or anything else for that matter. It was the fact that, you know, the women in their life in the future will benefit. So how do we have that conversation? Can we be bold enough as a region, as a DHB, to have that conversation?
I'm going to pass to Jim, but this is a school-based program. Yeah. And I think the boldness actually has to come with parents who provide the consent.
Yeah, absolutely granted, but is there something can we grease the wheels? Can we?
So maybe Jim or somebody will update the board a bit on the school-based program.
Yeah, so the results from the school-based program were in that paper, and they can be better. They're not dire, but they really can be better, and it's really around getting that rate up. And the point about it is actually publicising the value of the HPV vaccination, and for boys and for girls, or young women and young men, and the lifetime benefits that brings. And also the evidence that's showing in some countries where they have had higher uptakes of the vaccination, the effect already showing with the reduction in the numbers of women presenting with cervical cancer later on in their lives, because there's a latent period there before it presents. And so, the evidence that is already well researched and trusted evidence around that. So it's really about getting that information across to the decision makers. In this case, it is parents signing the consent forms, as you say, and a variety of ways of doing that.
And the follow-up, you can get a vaccine at school, and then you're required to find your own way to the GP when you leave school. So it's not just about what's provided on school. When your age ticks over, and then you may not have received your second follow-up vaccine. It's about that information as well.
So does that lie in the hands of GP? Does that take the information about who's been vaccinated at school?
Individuals and the National CIR will eventually hold that in one repository, and GPs will have the information, but it's an individual's, like parents, to support consent.
Indeed, though, but for follow-up, it seems to me like, you get a push notification for your mammogram or your cervical screening or your...
I'm not sure about HPV. I'll check into that.
Because that would be an obvious hole that many of them would fall into.
Yeah,
check into it. They generally do recalls as a matter of course.
What is the follow-up? How much later?
I think it's within 2 years of the first vaccine, but I can't be quoted on that.
Okay. All right. I think we need to be moving along. So we are now on to the Maternity Quality and Safety Annual Report at page 47, and a link to that was embedded in CITEPS. So this is a noting report. Is someone going to give us just the headlines arising from this report?
Yeah, it can do. I mean, the report there is extremely comprehensive and shows a lot of work that's going on within maternity services, and not just within the DHB services. You can see there the importance of consumers and the wider service providers in putting that report together. And as you see there, it is actually an annual report, and so requires that level. It is linked back to the Maternity Quality and Safety Program, which has been in place for a number of years, but has just in the last 12 months received a big boost in funding from government around improving that program. And so we're getting more resources to be able to enable the program to happen. We're doing reasonably well with most of the indicators in there, you will see. And, so that is good news, but obviously still where we can work on further. And we've got good buy-in from our providers, midwives in particular, for instance, and our obstetricians and gynecologists within the organisation and outside the organisation to progress that forward.
Does anyone have questions of Jim?
It was an excellent paper.
Very good, congratulations. Well done. Now I know you can. Do correct me if I get this wrong. We're now looking at the planned care waiting times for otorhinolaryngology, otherwise known as ENT.
I do have a question on.
I've been practicing that. So this is, I think this was paper you asked for, Nikki. And is someone going to give us a quick talk on this one? Or do we go straight to questions on it?
Not especially, but talking to it, but it's yeah, I thought it was, so didn't get arranged for anybody to come on and talk to it.
So as the requester of this, Nikki, is there any comments you want to make?
Just wanted to thank Lindsay for putting the report together, and really comprehensive, which is good in that it shows the situation in the context of the total referrals received and the breakdown. I just had one question, and right down the bottom, page 48, the wait list for Māori is 36, and I presume that's beyond 4 months. What I really want to know is how long are people on that waiting list? Do you know? Because once it gets beyond 4 months, is it just languish at the bottom? And then my second question was, when you look at clinical need, if we're looking at those that are languishing on the waiting list the most, is that because they have the least clinical need? And if that's the case, why don't we just treat them and then clear the waiting list?
I guess it's really, it's what Anil was talking before about having the right person to be able to provide that treatment. So yes, basically those are people with lower priority area, things that they're waiting for, but obviously important issues for them. And we've agreed that we will provide them with treatment. So it is a question about getting the right person to provide that treatment, which is what Anil was talking about before in resourcing and sourcing some additional support for that.
So that's the support you're talking out of Auckland and the additional weekend clinics.
So what our current oral specialist is doing is separating the ones that require likely to require surgery and not require surgery. And so he's trying to exploit this particular individual who comes in over the weekend to look at the ones that don't require, less likely to require surgery and clear that list. And so then he can focus on the ones that require surgery. So it's just trying to get that because the capacity to do the surgery is limited. So we just want to make sure we can clear as much of the waiting list, and then the hard stuff we can then focus on that. So our current oral specialist can focus on that group. We are getting a trainee coming from Wellington at some stage over the next few months. So hopefully that will also help with clearing that wait list.
So can someone answer, do we know how many on that waiting list have been on the list for longer than 12 months, for longer than 2 years, for longer than 3 years?
Yes, we do know that number. I don't have it with me, but I can find that number for you.
Because that's what I really want to know is the comments we get is been languishing on this waiting list for years. And I just want to have better clarification as what does that mean? Is it 3 or 5 years? And what sort of clinical need means that they languish on the waiting list for that long?
We can get that list, as Jim said. I did have a wee look at the list with the general manager of the service just to see what the spread is, both for urology, ophthalmology, and and oral, and to see what they were and why there's been such a long wait and things. Unfortunately, I have got access to the data myself, and I'm still working through that process. Once I get that data, then I can probably put it as an agenda item for the next meeting and get that to you.
Okay. So just on that, how does those numbers, I'm looking at the treatment waiting times at page 29, which has us for ENT with at the 7th of April with 47 on the wait list for treatment for more than 4 months. So you're wanting to know of those, what's their time frame beyond 4 months?
Yeah, the aging of that beyond 4 months, beyond 5 months, going upwards.
My question relates to the very first row.
3,000?
50. Yeah, I'm like looking at it going, when I first looked at the table, I was like, how does that work? 53,000 referrals since April last year. Well, last year. Is that number right?
Yeah, that won't be right. There's an extra number in there somewhere.
But then that's commuted through to might have been 25,000. I was like, someone's got this wrong. Unless
once you get to the total FSAs waiting, you'll be back to
one.
Yeah.
Maybe total referrals is total referrals to the hospital.
I think it is.
Could be.
That's what I took that to me.
I'll check that one for you too.
Yeah, the entire system.
So the ENT referrals were 995. It's a little bit further down on the table.
Yeah. I do find the fact that 30% of those on the waiting list are children under the age of 16, and having, when I was a child, I had massive ENT problems, and eventually had my tonsils out as an adult because the system didn't accommodate me as a child, but, lost so much time through illness. And, in this here, our rangatahi suffer in so many different ways, that percentage does alarm me. But I don't know if that's a good percentage or not. I mean, is that a standard percentage, 30%? 16-year-olds waiting?
Some of them are for simple procedures like placing a grommet in the ear and things. So it's just trying to, and it might be some with tonsils and adenoids being removed, but it's just trying to go through that list. You need to go through the list to make to understand it a wee bit better to answer your question.
I think the key with this is it's a simple procedure, but actually the implications for a child with grommets, we all know, is significant. Education, learning.
Although grommets have become less of a surgery of choice these days compared to a few years ago.
Yeah.
So it's treatment, delayed treatment.
Yeah.
Delayed treatment, just the impact is exponential.
But also I don't see the breakdown in there of the referrals coming through by age group, but in this area, a large proportion would be 0 to 16-year-olds.
I think we just probably got a little bit startled in all of this by that very first figure, and then went back and thought, oh no, those aren't the ENT referrals.
No, they're not. Yeah.
Everybody with the ENT referrals
come down to the third line.
But it would be really great if we could get this report tweaked a bit more in light of what Hiki identified.
For sure. And especially given that it is, one of our identified areas where we do have specialist capacity issues that we're trying to address. Okay. Look, I think that brings us now to the close of our public agenda. So I'm going to move that we go into public excluded. We'll have a break for a very quick cup of tea. And then Josh and Rob will reconvene at 11:15 for a brief discussion on a couple of matters that we talked about last month. And then we'll meet with Ian Galton from HealthShare. Cupway? Okay. So 11:15.